Writing. This is teacher Raisa. Composition writing. What does it entail, composition writing? Oftentimes we get stuck up on how to write and how to present information that we got. You know, we get all these articles, we get all this data, but then how do we construct it? Which of the different kinds of writing skills do we get to use? Before you get to use either, I'm going to take the time to explain to us the different kinds. Writing, a composition writing. What is a composition writing? What is an essay writing? It is simply entails what a writer uses to structure a piece of work or a piece of writing. The writer, there are different forms in which a writer uses to structure a piece of work or a piece of writing. It's the format. There's a format that you use in order to write. That is a composition, as a format or the structure that the writer uses in writing a piece of work or writing a piece of paper or writing a piece of article. That is a composition. And basically, all rules have told us over and over before that there are three ways of writing. There's the three ways of format. You have the introduction, of course, the introduction. Of course, the introduction introduces the topic. It introduces the topic, what you're going to write about. That's the introduction. Number two is the body. The body, that is when you go into details. Oftentimes, I would advise you to have at least 3 paragraphs, that you go into details about your research, about what you've had, about your findings. And the body usually talks about the suggestions that you've made. It talks about the suggestions. Talks about suggestions. Talks about your discoveries. And gives recommendations. It gives recommendations. It suggests, tells about the discoveries, and then it gives you your recommendation. And then finally, you have your conclusion. Your conclusion. And your conclusion often summarizes. Your conclusion summarizes. Suggestions are often what the other person thinks of. And then conclusions are the summary. You summarizes. What is it in general, to wrap it up in a nutshell, conclusively, at the end of it? What are your conclusions? These are the different formats that you use in writing a composition or in writing in general. There are basically 4 or 5 different kinds or different types of writing skills. And we're going to look at them today. We're going to look at 4 or 5. You have the narrative, you have the descriptive, you have the expository, you have the persuasive, and then of course you have the creative. These are the different kinds of writings that you can find. Let's talk a little bit about persuasive. Persuasive writing. What is persuasive writing? By the word persuasive, already you know that it's something that is biased. Persuasive, it means that you're being biased. It means that you're following either the writer's or the author's point of view. That is the meaning of being persuasive. You have an article that you've read and you're trying to convince others or the readers. You're trying to convince the readers. And so what you do is write a persuasive essay, a persuasive composition that you are either for the opinion of the main author of the article, either you are against it, but nevertheless, it's more about the opinion of the author. So it's much more biased. And oftentimes we see persuasive writing in either problem-solving essays, or we see them sometimes in opinion essays. That is where you see persuasive writing, when the authors are biased, when the authors take the part of the writer's point of view. That's where you see persuasive. What about creative? Creative, when you talk about creative, it's the funniest of all writings. It means it's something that is relaxed, something that is cool. It doesn't really have a structure. It's not really determined by certain things. As long as it's for fun, as long as it's interesting, it just goes on and on. So creative is just all about creating your mind, about inventing. It's all for entertainment. You know, it's all for a play. Usually you see them in plays or dramas or comedies or short novels. So they don't really have a structure per se, but then normally you just use them because it's for fun. So there they are. So that is a persuasive writing. So you see that they have the persuasive writing. And I said persuasive writers take on the opinion of the author, the person that wrote the book, that wrote the article. You take on it. It's more biased, and it's often seen in opinion essays or problem solution essays. And then creative writing, it's the funniest type of all of them. It's often used for entertainment. It's the funniest of them because it's not really restricted. It's not really stereotyped. It's just easy. It's simple. It doesn't really follow a certain format, a certain structure, like I said. And oftentimes we see them in short novels and plays and dramas and comedies. Anything that will make you laugh, anything that will make you relax, everything that will make you have fun. It has no protocol in writing, like I said. And then as long as it's interesting, so it's often for entertainment. These are the persuasive and creative. Now let's go to the more serious ones. Let's move now to the more serious ones. You have the narrative writing. Narrative writing is something that we see a lot. It's often, it's often used. Narrate means to tell, to explain, to say a story. Oftentimes we use them when we want to say a story, when we want to share our personal views about something. It's often personal. And anything that is personal, therefore, it is true. It has facts. So that's a narrative writing. It's either, sometimes it's even fictional. And with narratives, it has a structure. It has a protocol. It has a storyline. It has different persuasive, and we've looked at creative writing. Now we're going to go to narrative. Oftentimes, I love narratives because with narratives, you get to go into details. You get to put yourself in the other's shoes. You get to bring it, make it more out there. That's why I like narratives. And narratives, you get to describe. You get to go into details. You get to tell what the story is all about. That is why oftentimes you see narratives are often used in biographies and writing of biographies, of eulogies, of novels. You see narratives in them. And narratives are much more personal. They're personal because there's things that are true, things that have happened, and you're trying to describe what has either happened or what is to happen. Or they're fictional. Sometimes it could be fictional as well. It means you're trying to be creative about something. You're trying to narrate an event. So it could be an event that you're narrating. It could be a thing. It could be an idea. It could be an event that you're describing. That is all a narration that you're trying to tell the public. So it is a narrative. Descriptive writing. We've seen persuasive, creative, narrative, and now we're on descriptive. Descriptive means a description. You describe, trying to make it vivid. You want to tell that person, or you want to tell the readers in detail what something is. And so you go into details. It's either about presenting an idea, a product, an article, an event. Oftentimes, the advertising industry or the entertainment industry, oftentimes they will use a descriptive, especially when we want to publicize or advertise a product or an idea. So the writer gets to makes the readers to be able to see clearly. It's almost very visual. It's like taking you off your seat into it. It's like placing you into the event, like into the idea or the subject of the writing. And so they add in sometimes, and sometimes they could add in symbols, sometimes they could add in pictures in them to make it more clear, to make it more vivid, to make it more easy to understand, to make it more plain. And with creative writing, oftentimes you would see the usage of metaphors, of simile, of symbolism. Remember we talked about metaphor, that it's trying to describe two things without using as or like. Simile, describing two things in a different way that would use an as or like. And then symbolism, that is the use of terms or symbols or pictures or icons or objects to describe things. And so with the descriptive writing, often you will see that. And then the last one is exploratory. Exploratory means that you want to explore something. That is the meaning of exploratory. Sometimes it's about facts. You're using the facts. You focus more on the facts of the author of the article, not so much on the opinion of whoever wrote it, of the author, but the writer is focused more on the facts of the main subject. That is exploratory writing. And so we have what I just explained, the narrative that I told you, that is mostly about telling or sharing personal or known experiences or fictional. And then oftentimes, I've told you, we use them in biographies, in eulogies, and plots and storylines are being used as a structure. And that with narratives, you get to place yourself in it. With narratives, it's much more personal. And then descriptive is describing a product. Often the advertising industries or commercials, they usually use a descriptive writing because they want to sell a product, they want to sell an idea, they want to sell an event, they want to sell an article. And so it's much more picturestic too sometimes, especially with like kids in the kindergarten. It's much more descriptive because we add in pictures, we add in synonyms like things like you're trying to do a comparison and a contrast. And then it's descriptive. So descriptive is much more visual. So it has a lot of visual words being used, a lot of visual articles being used. And then expository is to expose facts. You're exposing facts, you're defining facts, you're exposing the data that you've already gathered. You want to show it, you want to present to the readers that it's because of this, because of this, because of this. You've collected your facts, you want to define it, you want to tell us why you've gotten to this conclusion. And most oftentimes, it's common in textbooks and online. It's just about the facts. Expository is just about the facts. The opinion of the author is not meaningful at this point. We just focus on what the writer has said. That being said, these are the different forms of writing. Now it's your turn, students, to be able, why don't you go home, able to use either of these five or five of them and just write short stories and present them to me. Let me see what it is. How can I help you about it? And then get some articles. Try to pick out some similes in them, pick out a metaphor in them, pick out symbolism in them, present them to, send them to Teacher Raisa. Let's work on it and have fun in essay writing. What's your favorite? My favorite is narrative because, like you see, I like to narrate. Thank you. Stay well, stay blessed, go conquer the world. Teacher Raisa. Jana together with son manga jangale gita do bouche do fay wen elef to tolo ci exam linga sala am na fita mo gënal